What is the most shocking thing you've ever discovered by pure accident? Today, we are looking at 11 massive detailed stories from Reddit where lives were completely flipped upside down in a matter of seconds. We're talking double lives exposed in hospital rooms and childhood mysteries that took 10 years to solve. These stories are long, intense, and 100% real. Drop a comment on which one shocked you the most, and let's start with our first story.
When I was about 8 years old, my dad took me to an abandoned subway station in our city that was being opened for a one-day historical tour. It was dark, dusty, and smelled like old iron. In the middle of the main platform, there was something completely out of place. A massive sandbox filled with clean white beach sand. My dad was talking to the tour guide, so I walked over to the sandbox. I started digging with my hands, just passing the time. About a foot deep, my fingers hit something solid and cold. It felt like metal. I dug faster and uncovered a heavy, old-fashioned brass key with a strange symbol carved into the handle. I quickly hid it in my pocket, feeling like a real treasure hunter. I didn't tell my dad because I was afraid he would make me give it back. For the next 10 years, that key sat in my desk drawer. It became a running joke in my head, a mystery from my childhood that would never be solved. When I turned 18, I inherited an old, locked wooden chest that belonged to my biological grandfather, whom I had never met. My mom told me he was an engineer who worked on the city's underground infrastructure back in the 1960s. The chest had no keyhole on the front, which was very frustrating. Instead, I found a hidden sliding panel on the bottom of the chest. Underneath it was a heavy brass lock. My heart skipped a beat. I ran to my desk, grabbed the subway key, and slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a loud click, the chest opened, revealing old blueprints of the city's hidden tunnels.
My older brother David was always the golden child of our family. He was a brilliant software engineer, married his high school sweetheart, and lived in a beautiful house 3 hours away from us. We didn't talk every day, but we were close. He was the most stable person I knew. 2 months ago, David was involved in a serious car accident and ended up in a coma. As his closest relative living nearby, I rushed to the hospital. The police handed me his personal belongings, including his phone, which was unlocked. They told me they needed help identifying a woman who was in the car with him. I thought it was a coworker, but when I opened his messages, my world completely shattered. David had an entire second family. He had been living with this other woman for over 4 years, and they had a 2-year-old daughter together. He had rented an apartment under a slightly altered name. He managed this by telling his wife he was doing long-term consulting work that required him to travel every single week. He had 2 separate bank accounts, 2 phones, and 2 completely different lives. Both women genuinely believed he was a loyal, hard-working husband. Now, David is still in the hospital, unable to speak, and I am the only person who knows the truth. The other woman is frantically calling his phone from the hospital next door, while his legal wife is sitting right next to his bed, holding his hand and crying. I feel sick to my stomach. I spent 3 days in absolute agony, staring at his 2 lives colliding in my hands. The stress was physically making me ill. I knew that keeping this secret made me complicit in his lies, but breaking the news to his wife while he was fighting for his life felt incredibly cruel. Eventually, the pressure became too much. The other woman showed up at the main hospital area after tracking David's car location through an app. She walked right into the intensive care unit holding her toddler. Looking for her fiancé, watched the color drain from his wife's face. The confrontation wasn't loud or violent. It was just tragic. Both women realized at the exact same moment that their entire lives were a lie. His wife looked at me, saw the guilt in my eyes, and realized I already knew. She left the hospital immediately and filed for divorce the next day. David eventually woke up from his coma a week later. The first thing he did was look around the empty room. No one was there. Both families left him. His reputation is completely destroyed, and our parents refuse to speak to him. He ruined everything for a fantasy.
I live in a very quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever happens. Everyone knows everyone, and the daily routine never changes. But last Tuesday, I experienced something that makes me question my own sanity every time I think about it. I was driving home from work around 6 p.m. As I turned onto my street, I noticed my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, walking his golden retriever. He waved at me, just like he does every single day. I waved back, parked my car in my driveway, and walked inside my house. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, looking out the front window. I saw Mr. Henderson and his dog walk past my house again, heading in the same direction. I didn't think much of it, assuming he just turned around. But then, things got incredibly weird. 10 seconds later, I saw Mr. Henderson walk past my window again. Same clothes, same dog, same walking pace. It was like a 5-second video loop playing in real life. My heart started racing. I walked out onto my front porch to get a better look at what was happening. As I stood there, I looked down the street. There were 3 identical versions of Mr. Henderson and his dog, walking in a perfect line, spaced about 20 feet apart. None of them looked at each other. They just kept moving forward like broken video game characters. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was having a medical emergency or a stroke. I pulled out my phone to record it. But the moment I lifted the camera, all 3 of them reached the corner of the street at the exact same time and vanished behind a hedge. I ran down to the corner, but the street was completely empty. Half an hour later, I saw the real Mr. Henderson coming out of his house to grab the mail. I asked him if he had been out walking his dog earlier, and he looked at me confused, saying he had been asleep all afternoon.
10 years ago, I worked for a mid-sized tech company. My manager, Greg, was a textbook narcissist. He took credit for all my coding work, blocked my promotions, and constantly humiliated me in front of the executives. I eventually quit, but I promised myself I would get even. I spent the next decade working my way up the corporate ladder at a rival firm. I gained a reputation for fixing failing departments and turning them into profit machines. Last year, my company acquired Greg's company in a massive multi-million-dollar buyout. As the new regional VP, I was put in charge of restructuring the newly acquired branch. On my very first day, I walked into the conference room for a staff evaluation meeting. Greg was sitting there, looking smug, completely unaware of whose new boss was going to be. When I walked in, his jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might faint. I didn't say anything about our past. I just smiled, shook his shaking hand, and sat down at the head of the table to begin the review. Over the next month, I used his own tactics against him. I audited his department and found years of poorly managed projects and inflated metrics that he had been hiding. I didn't have to fabricate anything. His own laziness was his downfall. Instead of firing him immediately, I reassigned him to an entry-level QA testing position, the exact same role I had 10 years ago under his supervision. His new boss was a 23-year-old intern I had just promoted. He lasted exactly 4 days before quitting in shame.
My husband and I bought our first home 2 years ago. It was a beautiful historic house built in the late 1920s. The only downside was a small, creepy attic door located in the ceiling of our master bedroom closet. It always rattled when the wind blew outside. A few months after moving in, I started waking up at exactly 3:14 a.m. every night. I would hear faint, rhythmic scratching noises coming from directly above our bed. It sounded like someone was dragging long fingernails across the wooden floorboards of the attic. My husband insisted it was just squirrels or raccoons trapped in the roof. He put some traps up there, but they always remained completely empty, and the scratching noises only grew louder and more aggressive as the weeks went by. One night, the noise stopped being just scratching. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. to the sound of the attic door slowly sliding open inside our closet. I froze in terror, staring at the closet door, which was slightly ajar. I could hear heavy, irregular breathing. I shook my husband awake, whispering that someone was in the house. He grabbed a flashlight and slowly opened the closet door. The attic ladder was down. He shone the light up into the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just an old dusty leather shoe sitting on the top step. We decided to install a security camera facing the closet. The next morning, we reviewed the footage from the night before. At 3:14 a.m., the camera captured a pale, unnaturally thin arm reaching down from the attic opening, gently closing our closet door from the inside. We didn't stay to find out who or what that arm belonged to. We packed our bags, stayed at a hotel, and put the house on the market the following week. The police searched the attic, but found no signs of forced entry or anyone living there.
A few years ago, I started noticing strange things happening in my apartment. I would find small, yellow post-it notes left on my desk with random, creepy phrases written in messy handwriting. The notes said things like, "Save yourself," or "Don't forget to lock the door." I lived completely alone, and there were no signs of forced entry. I was absolutely terrified. I thought my landlord was sneaking into my place while I was at work. Or worse, that someone had secretly cloned my apartment keys and was playing a sick psychological game with me. I decided to post on Reddit's legal advice forum, asking how to legally force my landlord to show me the security camera footage. The comments were filled with standard advice, but one user left a comment that completely threw me off. They told me to stop looking at my landlord and buy a carbon monoxide detector immediately. I thought the comment was completely random, but I was desperate, so I ran to the store and bought one. The moment I plugged it in, the alarm started screaming at a lethal volume. It turned out my apartment had a massive gas leak coming from the old heating system. The worst part? The doctor later explained that the carbon monoxide was causing severe memory loss and hallucinations. I was the one writing those creepy notes to myself during the night, completely forgetting about it by the morning. That one Reddit comment literally saved my life.
My family was always incredibly private. We moved from city to city every couple of years, and my parents always strictly warned me and my sister never to talk about our family history with classmates or teachers. We thought they were just overprotective, old-school immigrants. When I turned 18, I needed to apply for a passport to go on a college trip. I asked my mum for my official birth certificate. She panicked, made up a lame excuse about losing it in the last move, and told me she would order a new one from the government database. Weeks went by, and nothing arrived. I decided to take matters into my own hands, and went to the local vital statistics office, myself. I gave them my name, my date of birth, and my parents' names. The lady behind the counter stared at the screen for a long time, then called her manager. 2 police officers walked into the room 10 minutes later. They took me into a private office and told me that the person with my name and social security number had actually died in a car accident in another state over 20 years ago, when I was just a baby. It turned out my parents had kidnapped me from a supermarket when I was a toddler. They fled across the country, found the identity of a deceased child who matched my age, and raised me under a completely stolen life. My entire existence, my name, and my history were a lie.
I work as a senior network engineer for a massive financial corporation. My job is basically to monitor the company's internal network traffic and make sure our firewalls are secure from hackers. It's usually pretty boring, but last month I stumbled upon something insane. I noticed a massive, constant stream of data being encrypted and sent to a private server in China every single day during office hours. My first thought was that our corporate network had been breached by foreign state-sponsored hackers, so I immediately launched an internal investigation. I tracked the digital footprint back to a specific desktop computer on the 5th floor. It belonged to Bob, a quiet, older software developer who had been with the company for 15 years. Bob was known as a legendary coder who always delivered flawless projects on time. When I remoted into his computer to see what malware was running, I found out Bob wasn't a victim at all. He had secretly outsourced his entire job to a tech company in China. He was paying them a fraction of his salary to do all his coding work while he sat at his desk all day. He spent his entire 8-hour shift watching cat videos on YouTube, browsing Reddit, and buying things on Amazon. He had been doing this for over 5 years, making a 6-figure salary for doing absolutely nothing. He was fired on the spot, but honestly, I kind of respected the hustle.
My boyfriend and I bought a beautiful old farmhouse out in the countryside. The house had a massive, unfinished concrete basement that we only used for storing old boxes and holiday decorations. It was always cold and creepy down there, so we rarely visited it. After a few months, I started noticing small details changing around the house. The milk carton would be slightly emptier than I remembered, or the television remote would be left on a different chair. I blamed it on my boyfriend's forgetfulness, and he blamed it on mine. One evening, my boyfriend went away on a weekend fishing trip, leaving me completely alone in the house. Around midnight, I was lying in bed watching a movie when I heard a distinct, heavy creak coming from the floorboards directly downstairs in the living room. I grabbed my phone, locked the bedroom door, and checked our smart home map. I looked at the power usage monitor, and my heart stopped. The basement lights, which were connected to a smart switch, had just been turned on manually from inside the basement. I called the police immediately and hid in the closet. When the cops arrived, they searched the entire house and eventually went down into the basement. Behind a wall of old storage boxes, they found a small, hidden crawl space that wasn't on our house blueprints. Someone had been living down there for at least 4 months. They found a sleeping bag, a collection of my missing clothes, and a notebook filled with detailed logs of our daily schedules. What time we went to sleep, when we left for work, and when I was left alone.
My ex-fiancée, Sarah, and I were together for 5 years. 6 months before our wedding, she started acting incredibly distant. She was always hiding her phone screen, going out for late-night emergencies with her friends, and spending thousands of dollars from our joint account. I had a bad feeling, so I hired a private investigator. The results came back a week later, and they were devastating. Sarah was having an affair with my own biological father. They were using our wedding savings to book luxury hotel rooms together while I was at work. I wanted to destroy her completely, so I played the long game. I pretended everything was completely fine. I smiled through the wedding rehearsals, paid for the expensive catering, and waited for the big day. Both she and my father thought they had gotten away with it. The wedding day arrived. The church was packed with over 200 guests from both sides of the family. We stood at the altar, and the priest asked if anyone objected to this marriage. Usually, this is just a formal question, but I stepped forward and took the microphone. I looked Sarah dead in the eyes and said, "I object because my bride is sleeping with my father." I pulled out a stack of printed photographs from the investigator and threw them into the crowd like confetti. The church erupted into absolute chaos. I walked down the aisle, hopped into a rented sports car, and drove straight to the airport for the honeymoon trip that I had rebooked just for myself. Sarah's life was completely ruined. My father was disowned by the family, and it was worth every single penny.
6 years ago, my wife and I bought an old, foreclosed estate that used to belong to a wealthy, eccentric pharmaceutical tycoon from the 1970s. The house was massive, beautiful, and full of strange architectural quirks, like random staircases and fake windows. We spent months renovating it, doing most of the work ourselves to save money. One afternoon, I was tearing down some old water-damaged drywall in the furthest corner of the basement. As the hammer broke through the plaster, it didn't hit solid concrete behind it. Instead, it swung right into empty space. I grabbed my flashlight, peeled back the broken pieces, and discovered a hidden concrete hallway. The hallway was narrow, damp, and smelled like 50 years of trapped air. My heart was pounding as I crawled through the opening. At the end of the corridor stood a massive industrial-grade steel vault door, the kind you only see in old banks. It had a heavy mechanical combination dial and a giant steel handle. I tried turning the handle, but of course, it was locked solid. I posted a picture of the vault on Reddit, and the post exploded overnight, gaining tens of thousands of upvotes. Everyone was giving advice, from using stethoscopes to hiring professional safecrackers, while some warned me that it might contain something dangerous. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I decided to hire an experienced locksmith who specialized in antique safes. It took him over 5 hours of intense drilling, measuring, and manipulation. When the heavy internal mechanisms finally clicked, he looked at me, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and stepped back. With a loud metallic screech, I pulled the heavy steel door open. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness inside. The vault wasn't empty, it was lined with steel shelves, and on those shelves sat dozens of vintage sealed wooden crates. My hands were shaking violently as I pried the first crate open. Inside the crates were thousands of perfectly preserved, uncirculated silver dollars from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, packed in heavy canvas bags. But that wasn't all. In the very back of the vault, sitting on a small table, was a leather-bound journal belonging to the original owner of the house. I opened the journal to the very last page, dated just days before the tycoon disappeared in 1982. The final entry read, "If you are reading this, it means they never found me, and the empire is officially yours. Use it wiser than I did." That discovery completely changed our lives forever, turning a regular house renovation into a multi-million-dollar treasure hunt.
All right, let's be honest. That last story about the hidden vault was absolutely insane. Imagine buying a house and ending up a millionaire. Which of these 11 stories blew your mind the most? Was it the double life caught in the hospital, or the literal glitch in the Matrix with the neighbor? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read all of them. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next crazy Reddit drop. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.